Thank you for joining us today. I'm John Sangenberger, and I lead the Alumni Relations team at the Tepper School. We're glad to welcome you to our third in a series of 4 webinars on the intelligent future, highlighting the interdisciplinary research initiatives at the Tepper School. The first 2 webinars on blockchain and sustainability involved alumni panel discussions with our faculty moderators. They're now available on our Tepper YouTube channel. The next 2 webinars, including today, will feature 4 of our outstanding Tepper faculty members on each one. Today's discussion will be on the intelligent future of inclusive growth and prosperity, and we'll be highlighting our international faculty. As always, please submit your questions during the presentation using the Q&A link. Now, let me begin by sharing a few of our upcoming events. First, our next webinar will be on April 8th. It will be on the intelligent future of healthcare and will feature our outstanding faculty, as you can see. Next, we will be sharing with you and invite you to join us for our WLML and speaker series with Revathi Advathi, who is CEO of Flex, where they have over 200,000 employees globally that design, engineer, and deliver logistical and manufacturing solutions for customers in more than 100 sites in 30 different countries. We also have our Enable, a CMU retail services and collaborative virtual presentation on data privacy, what impacts retailers, and it'll feature Andrew Lee from our operations research faculty. We're also delighted to invite you to join our Tepper Women in Business Leadership Conference that starts tomorrow on campus. It's got an impressive lineup of alumni speakers. You can register to attend in person and join us on campus or virtually online. And last but not least, we are so happy to be able to invite you to our upcoming reunion weekends. Registration is now open. We have over 100 alumni and guests who've already signed up for it for our reunions in April and May. And we're so excited to have our alumni back on campus for an in-person reunion. Now, to introduce the Tepper School's role in leading the intelligent future, please welcome the 10th Dean of the Tepper School of Business, Dean Isabelle Béjus-Barceneau. Dean Isabelle?
Thank you. Thank you so much, John, for the introduction. And thank you to all of you for joining us for the third of our 4 webinars in the Intelligent Future webinar series. Here at the Tepper School, we focus on building and teaching a better future for business. We call it the intelligent future. The intelligent future is fueled by data, powered by technology, and reimagined by human intelligence. And we're shaping it by shaping leaders with the right blend of skills to solve the problems of the future. Part of this intelligent future includes the Tepper School's interdisciplinary initiatives, which include blockchain, healthcare, inclusive growth and prosperity, and sustainability. These initiatives unite researchers, students, donors, and industry to advance understanding of important topics and how they shape business and society. This webinar series has been exploring each of these interdisciplinary initiatives with Tepper School faculty, experts, and alumni leaders in their respective domains. So far, we've looked at blockchain and sustainability. In today's session, we delve into our inclusive growth and prosperity initiative. The Tepper School is a major center of research on how economic growth disparately affects individuals, businesses, and communities, and how policy can be designed to better ensure that the benefits of growth are widely enjoyed. Now, let us turn towards today's session. Ali Shourideh, Associate Professor of Economics, will moderate the discussion among professors from the Tepper School, who are at the forefront of the intelligent future and inclusive growth and prosperity. Thank you again to all of you who are joining us today, and I look forward to learning together today and for the remainder of this webinar series. Ali, please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Dean Isabelle, for that very kind introduction. Thank you for everyone to join us at this event. I would like to welcome all of you to give you an overview of what we do in our Inclusive Growth Initiative, Inclusive Growth and Prosperity Initiative, and give you a snapshot of the type of research that we do around these topics. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I've been here now at CMU for about 6 years. Before that, I was a professor at Wharton School. And before that, I got my PhD from University of Minnesota. In general, I'm a theorist with, as you can see from what it says on the slide, with a wide range of interests. Particularly, I'm interested in social issues around inequality and how should we sort of think about smart policies to address them. Okay. All right. So let me start with the basic premise that of what our initiative is about. Okay. So the basic premise, and I think you guys all know this. This is something that we teach our undergraduates, our MBA students, and we do emphasize on it quite a bit. Is that most Western economies have had this incredible run of growth in the past 2 centuries. Actually, next slide, please. Yeah, so this is the picture that I'd like to show that I typically show my students in my macro class, and because I think I find it to be very remarkable. So what you're seeing is per capita GDP in many countries in the world, starting from year 0 all the way to year 2000. And you see that first, I think 2 things that stand out of how well US has been doing very recently, but also the fact that it's been doing fairly well only very recently. And so in historical context, this has just been it's pretty remarkable that we've been just sustainably growing at roughly around 2-3%. Of course, there's some ups and downs. And this is now I'm focusing on, instead of showing you historical figures, I'm showing you for the post-war data. And in the post-war period since 1948, this is kind of, it's been part of our economy. We can always assume that the U.S. economy, yes, sometimes does well, sometimes does it too well, sometimes does, goes through recessions, but it always has bounced back, and this growth has been fairly persistent. So now this is one side of it, which is the remarkable success, I think, that's been shown up in the aggregate. Now, of course, there are some issues issues that needs to be addressed, and these are issues that we'd like to address. One is the fact that we've had inequality going on. And this inequality has been both in the form of economic inequality and social inequality. So when I talk about economic inequality, what I mean by that is, income of certain parts of society has been growing faster than other parts. And then when I talk about social inequalities, we're talking about, in terms of opportunities for minority racial groups or for women and so on and so forth. The other things that people talk about and we'd like to also sort of think about them as researchers is this sort of rising power of monopolies that we do observe in the world, and in particular US economy. Now, when you think about these, and we read about these issues that are discussed in the media pretty much every day. Every day there's a New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Fox News article about these every day, and they can be very divisive. And we also know that recently, many people talk about polarization of opinions, polarization being observed in politics. And so what this does is that there is a lot of potential for bad policies and bad changes. In the sense that, just as an example, if we're thinking about government policies and not thinking about business policies, governments have a tendency to go for quick solutions. Politicians typically try that, because the typical horizon of political competition is quite low. And so I think this is where we sort of come in. We would like to be able to be a voice in this realm, trying to think about these questions, trying to address these issues by providing comprehensive studies. So this is just for example, I wanted to show you how income has changed in the same post-war period. What you see is that the 95th percentile of the income distribution has slowly taken off, especially in the 80s and 90s from the median or the 20th percentile. So we've had this sort of widening gap, at least in terms of economic inequality. But, we can also talk about other aspects of inequality like social inequality. Okay, so this is where we come in. Now, what I like to, so this is, now let me try to pitch to you what is our main goal here. Now, as I said, politics and politicians basically tempt even academics to make quick decisions. And what we would like to do is provide an alternative sort of approach and narrative, which is what I want to call a scientific approach to these big questions. In other words, this is sort of our methodology in economics. We provide measurement and data. Based on that measurement and data, we provide theoretical foundations of what we do observe in the data. And then we use the theories to think about policy analysis, whether this is about how private entities like companies should react to changes in inequality, or rising monopoly power, or social investing, and so on and so forth, or how public entities like government entities need to react to this. And in particular, I think this is sort of the advantage that we have, is that we're just not going to try as much as we can not to mix politics with it. And so provide politically neutral analysis to this issue, which is potentially very divisive and has become very political. And the other thing that I want to say is that we always want to keep in mind that we have had fantastic experience of fantastic growth. And despite all these issues, and we can talk about all those issues, and we can talk about the downsides of all these problems with inequality and so on and so forth, but we've had these remarkable period of 200 and 250 years of sustained growth in a handful of countries. Okay, so what I'd like to do is just to give you a sense of where we go. So, and this is, it's an ongoing process, not necessarily constraining people. We don't want to tell people our sort of academia is all about, academic freedom. We don't want to tell people what to do, but in our conversations and in our interaction, some big questions sort of emerge over time. So, we've sort of identified a few areas of focus. This is sort of what our faculty, my colleagues, they will show you their work, focus their research efforts on. So one of them, and again, this fits right into this idea of growth and inequality, is this idea that AI technologies and in general, more generally, technological change has drastically change the way we work. And so we'd like to know the effect of this on the future of work. We want to know its relationship with income security. We'd like to have, think about, business strategies that sort of react to this. We want to think about government policy that reacts to this. So big chunk of our efforts in our initiative, done by multiple members of our faculty in various groups. Today, Alice is going to talk about this, but we have other members of our group working on this, is on future of work and technology. The other big question that I think is an important one is the fact that, since the advent of internet, and in fact, I think this was done even before the internet. There are many allocation mechanisms that are being done centrally. If you think about the way doctors and hospitals match, this is a mechanism that the centralized mechanism. It's not the usual sort of market mechanism where hospitals compete with contracts and wage salaries and try to sort of attract doctors. You can also think about, within internet platforms, as an example, allocation of Uber drivers to riders. This, I think, is also is an important question, especially when it comes to social issues, because a lot of times governments try to create mechanisms like this, where they would, for example, allocate housing to disadvantaged groups, and so on and so forth. And so, another key question is, how do we ensure efficiency? How do we ensure fairness when we have these sort of centralized allocation mechanisms where market forces are, for various reasons, market forces are not there? Traditionally, we've been also, very good at thinking about government policies and their effects on markets and their effects on people's behavior and the effect of economic performance. Taxation, redistributive taxation, various forms of taxation, capital gains taxation, income taxation, corporate taxes, all of those we've done a lot of research on, myself included. Labor market policies is another aspect of it. So I think this is also an area of strength for us, and there are some big questions given all these changes that I said. And the other thing that I think is more sort of relevant going forward is this idea of social responsibility. Many, consumers, many investors, many professionals these days have this. They think that social responsibility needs to be part of agenda for companies or agenda for governments, and so on and so forth. Now, while this is a very, very new area, there is a lot of efforts in the industry. What needs to be done is, I think, we need to do major studies to figure out what is the best way to do this. Is this even feasible in today's world, and so on and so forth. An example of that is, for example, ESG investing. This is also another big question that we'd like to. So let me also give you an overview of our efforts. The first thing is, that's what we do is a big sort of important aspect of our work here at Tepper is our research, and you will see a quick snapshot of it next. The other type of efforts that we're trying to do. So, for example, we're going to have a seed grant announcement this summer to promote this topic, or the topic that we're interested in, and our big questions. We're going to also, hopefully in the near future, we will hold public speaking events by our faculty or by guest faculty members. We're also always trying to think about these big questions and turn them into classes to educate our students. And a very successful example of that is Lawrence's class on the future of work, and he's going to talk about his research when he when he showed some of that. And, in the future, the hope is that we would have a class on economics and business aspect of social change. This I think is a very exciting topic. It's very new. I think it would put us in a very unique position to relative to other business schools, and so I think it would, because of that, it would be very appealing to students. There is also, and again, this is in the works. The plan is to work with the community. So you might be aware that the CMU recently has established a Center for Shared Prosperity, which is powered by Heinz Foundation. They mainly focus on groundwork in terms of helping minority groups in Pittsburgh and general urban development, all of those topics. However, what I think is missing from their work is foundational research and in general critical thinking. Meaning, what we would like to be able to do with them, and again, this is not done yet. This is a plan for the future, is to think about how we can help them perhaps provide the studies, provide, classes for people who, for community workers who want to promote the Center for Shared Prosperity within the Pittsburgh community. And so that's another sort of effort that we are hoping to be able to do in the future. Now, okay, so this was I had my hat on as the head of the initiative. I would like to now put my researcher hat on and talk to you guys about some of my work. I would like to keep it brief because I would like mainly my colleagues to tell you about their work. But let me quickly tell you about some of my recent work. So when we think about, a branch of my research focuses on economics of taxation and its effect on inequality. So when we think about classic theory of optimal taxation, we would sort of this identifies a trade-off between equity and efficiency. So, societies typically have some form of preference for equity, although it differs from one country to the next or one society to the next. You would like people to be somewhat equal, but then at the same time, we know that making things too, quote unquote, too equal is going to be bad from an efficiency perspective because it just destroys people's incentives to work. And so the crucial question that comes up here is what is ideal equity? And so here, you can go to moral philosophy and think about utilitarianism, think about John Rawls's fairness principle, etc. You can also go to politics, in which case, this is, of course, a kind of a mockery of what's going on. Of course, there's a lot more nuance. The position of both people on the left and the right is more nuanced than what I'm saying here. Is that, but caricature of that is that people on the right say don't tax. People on the left say, well, tax all the rich guys. So in my work, again, this is in line with that scientific approach I was telling you before. What we have sort of thought about is that every time we think about tax reforms, we start from a status quo. And our approach in some of my work, in a few papers that I've written on this, has been to say, well, can we think about taxation reforms or reforms on the tax schedule or other forms of government regulation that are popular by everyone, in the sense that all the income groups would sign off on them? Is it possible? Now, the answer in one of our papers that has been published in the past I think it was published 3 years ago, has been yes, and in fact, there are large gains to be made. And so, what our research does is basically identifies major areas of improvement. So I will focus on the key elements that our study identifies. If there are questions, I'm happy to go into more details. But our study basically identifies two aspects of current tax and transfer system in the US. And I want to emphasize that this, when we want to think about this, we want to think about the tax and transfer system as a whole. All government programs that provide liquidity to some parts of the population. Social Security provides liquidity to the old. Medicaid, for example, provides healthcare to the poor, and so on and so forth. And so, a general principle that comes out of our study is that we cannot have drops in marginal tax rate. That's just inefficient. So I'm showing you here the marginal tax rate of a statutory marginal tax rate currently that we have in the US. This is as an approximation of that, and there are all many details that we need to take care of, but I'm just giving you a big picture on this. And when you see that area that I'm highlighting, you see that there is a sizable drop in marginal tax rate around the cap on payroll taxes. This is the tax that covers Social Security payments. And so what we show in our paper is that removing this cap is one source of gain. And the other thing that our study identifies is that another source of inefficiency in the data, in the current tax code and tax and transfer code as a whole, is that there is too little annuitization. In other words, our old population is not fully annuitized. If you think about most of our elderly individuals, they basically rely on Social Security. Social Security payments are fixed. They're not tied to people's mortality, and and the numbers are quite significant. Around 50% of our U.S. old age population relies solely on Social Security, and so what we show is that a subsidy later in life allows us to replicate this annuitization. Given the fact that annuity markets are quite inefficient, our study basically shows that an asset subsidy later in life can be a major source of improvement, and these mix of policies can basically make everybody better off, allows the political system to actually vote for such a change. Okay, so with that, let me conclude there. And what I want to do is now give the podium to my colleagues. I think at first we're going to have Alexei Kushner, who is an associate professor of economics, his research is focused on market and mechanism design. After that, we're going to have Lian Shi, who is a young assistant professor, a macroeconomist who works on labor market policies. And finally, we're going to conclude with Lauren Salas, who is going to tell us about his work on future of work and taxation.
Thank you. Thank you very much to John and Dean Isabel, and also to Ali. I'm very much excited to be part of the Intelligent Future Initiative. And as Ali pointed out, US and many countries enjoy growth in the recent years, and significant growth. And now the question how the benefits of these growth can be allocated among the society. And typically we think, and we can rely on the markets to locate these benefits among the society. However, the problem that some markets are not inefficient, and this is one question of antitrust, but some markets really need to be designed. And this is where my research comes in. So the research in market design basically concerns the question of how to allocate several objects or assets among several people or companies. And typically, whenever we think, we talk about bourse, the situations when we have money, and we talk about the auctions, as on the left side of this slide. And we talk about the US Treasury auctions, allocation of the spectrum, and many, many other applications. So auctions became widespread in the economy and in many parts of our life. But also, there are many situations when actually money considered to be repugnant or not allowed. Think about, you have a kids and how to allocate kids to public schools. Money doesn't look to be the right instrument to do that. That's another part of market design, how to design mechanisms when monies are not there or not allowed. In other situations, how to allocate donated food. And I will tell you in a minute the example of Feeding America. Their money kind of repugnant and the donated food shouldn't be sold. But artificial money can be very helpful. Next slide, please. So this is an amazing example where the design of market become very successful. So Feeding America is an umbrella organization that supervises more than 200 food banks, and basically to receive donations of the food. More than 300 million pounds per year. And the food can be in various types, cans, groceries, and so on. So how to allocate this food to different food banks. So previously it was a system that you can call briefly, wait your turn. It explains very straightforwardly. You have a line of food banks. It's based on some factors, how many poor people or poor population it serves. And basically you allocate food, each bank one at a time. So objective was basically you have a load of food and you need to allocate an equal number of pounds approximately spread in the population. And the system didn't care about what kind of food. It can be good quality food, those that is needed at a place or not. One fancy example is actually the load of potatoes, and it was allocated to Idaho. It was quite weird. So two major problems. One, it doesn't differentiate in terms of what kind of food is allocated to what food banks. And the other, offering one load per time is not very efficient. Next slide. So they introduced then the new system. So the economists designed together with people working in the Feeding America. It based on the market. So it allocated not real market money to the food banks, but the fake money. And then it allowed using these fake monies that they call shares to bid 2 times a day for different loads. They ensure that not only big food banks, very rich food banks can get the food, but actually a smaller one that serves a smaller share of the population can benefit from that. So it included the ability to borrow and save, fractional bidding in the sense that the several food banks can unite their efforts to bid for the food, and also negative prices. They actually allowed even to sell the food that food banks have. So two benefits of this choice system. Again, I'm happy to explain in more detail, but first, it allows to bid for different loads. And if this is a turn and you don't like this load, you don't need to bid. You can save money. And of course, if you win, you're happy. And this money that you pay actually allocated among other food banks. So the other outcome and the benefit that actually the food is allocated immediately to everyone, not one at a time, but to everyone. It allowed to much faster processing of the food. And actually many food has an expiration date. So you need to process it more rapidly. So it was a huge success. Next slide. So this is based on the fake money idea, I have also, my research interest corresponds to allocation of courses for undergraduates in the college system. So currently there is a system that basically allows to allocate in a fine way. So basically there is a week that students sign up for courses, and there is a random window where each student can log in and choose the courses to pick. But these windows are allocated very randomly. And if you happen to receive a bad random number, you might not be able to get the courses that you want. Next slide. So we design a system based on the market forces that, in addition to being efficient and the students can report truthfully, it actually provides a very fair allocation. So the current system suffers that it's possible that there is a student who receives all 5 courses which they like, and the other student who cannot get neither of the popular courses. So in this sense, it's not fair. The new system allows more fair allocation. Next slide. Another part of the research concerns exactly the auctioning items. And since I don't have much time, I will be brief here. So there is a lot of research, and we know how to allocate a single good, a single service, or multiple goods of the same type. But what about if there are different types of goods, or they can be tailored to the need of a people to whom you allocate? What's the optimal mechanism? What is revenue optimal mechanism? Do you bundle several goods? You allocate separately? You tailor the service or you do not? So all these questions have been unanswered, and I'm trying to pursue it in my research. In addition to the inclusive growth and prosperity, one question: how to incorporate small businesses in auctions? Do you set aside subsidies? What is beneficial? How does it influence revenue? Is there any trade-offs, or it's vice versa? By attracting more bidders, you increase the revenue. This is questions that I'm trying to understand in my research. Thank you very much, and I think I want to hand the floor to Professor Lea. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm also very excited to be here, to be part of this initiative and to talk to you about my research. So in my research, I look at the role of employment contracts in affecting labor market outcomes and overall macroeconomic outcome. Specifically, I look at non-compete clauses, contracts that restrict employees from taking on new outside opportunities when they leave their current employers. So there is substantial controversy and disagreements over these contracts. On the one side, the anti-competitive effects of these clauses are very concerning. They restrict labor mobility and the possibility for workers to take on new and better jobs. And they potentially also limit the bargaining power of workers against their employers. In addition to that, they also create barriers to entry. So it's more difficult for new firms to enter, to start a new firm when it's difficult to hire. In addition to that, we see that a substantial amount of new startups actually come from an employee leaving their job and spinning out as a new firm. So if they are subject to non-compete clauses, they wouldn't be able to start on their own. So together, all these forces generate substantial distortions to the economy and create impediments to economic growth. So there are substantial variations in non-compete law across different states. So famously, California actually bans non-compete clauses, and this has been attributed to creating a favorable environment to the rise of Silicon Valley, for example, when employees can freely leave and hop around jobs and start new companies. On the other hand, incumbent firms and employers often argue that they need the protection of non-compete clauses to carry out certain investments. For example, investing in their employees on human capital through training and in carrying out R&D projects and sharing trade secrets with their employees. So these, as I said, these disagreements over the merits of non-compete clauses have led to substantial differences in non-compete law. So in my research, I bring together the two sides of the arguments and to assess the overall trade-off by bringing in data and theory and model to scientifically assess the gain versus losses. So we hear a lot of anecdotal stories about non-compete clauses. Maybe some of you have encountered them. So Amazon famously is known for its 18-month non-compete clauses for its workers. So the first task for addressing the question is going from anecdotal evidence to data. And there are surveys suggesting that a large amount of US workers have signed non-compete clauses. Next slide, please. And so 18% of US workers have at some point signed non-compete clauses. So in my work, and I saw that there are actually a lot of contracts that are publicly available, in particular executives working for publicly listed companies. And so Ali talked about changing technology and how we work. And this has also affected how economists and researchers work. So with the development of machine learning tools, we are able to gather large amount of verbal contracts and decipher the information in there. And that's what I did. And we see that roughly 64% of executives in US public listed firms have entered non-compete clauses. And this has been on a rising trend. So we also see that these clauses led to substantial reductions in labor mobility, that workers don't change jobs as often. And also the barrier to entry effect is also substantial, that there is a decline in new firm entry. And these effects are consistent with some of the symptoms that of the US economy. So we see large harm, substantial harms brought about by non-compete clauses. However, when looking at the benefits, in comparison, seems to be much milder. So this suggests that there are gains for policies to intervening in these contracts. Next slide, please. That there are scope for policies to regulate non-compete clauses and improve the efficiency of the overall outcome. And the question is how long a restriction we wanted to impose. So I find that maybe a few months of garden leave may be reasonable, but a few years of exclusion is excessive. And we're also seeing a lot of policy initiatives of banning non-compete clauses in DC, and also a new initiative by the Biden administration to promote labor market mobility. So I will stop here and hand over to Lawrence.
Thank you, Lian. Always a pleasure to participate in these webinars. It's always nice to see so many alumni in the participants list. Let me give you a glimpse of the type of research that most aligns with this initiative. The way you should think about it is, what are the key forces that would enable us to share prosperity coming from growth? And what comes to mind is clearly the government. So in this respect, I think a lot about how should we design taxation? For example, how should we differently tax a CEO versus a regular employer? Or how differently should we tax individual depending on not only how much they make, but also where they live? Another important channel that will impact how prosperity is distributed is the type of technology we implement. So in this area, I've been thinking a lot about how different technology impact different workers. Next slide, please. So let me start by the taxation. My work that is happening literally today, or when I'm done back to this webinar, is to think about geography. The United States has a lot of inequality, and that inequality is not in incomes, but also as we start thinking about where geographic inequality occurs. Here is a map that cuts the data in one particular way. For each state, let me, for example, illustrate how differently are urban areas than rural areas. Recent economic analysis has focused a lot on the health of rural communities and how they are performing over time. And if I look at how their inequality is different between urban and area, we see a lot of inequality. Let me give you an example. For Pennsylvania, if I compare urban area, I think Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, Philadelphia versus rural areas, I see that on average, individuals in urban areas earn 20 or 30%. And this number varies greatly across states. So next slide, please. Is there a role for policy? Our work says yes, meaning that is appropriate for the government to start thinking about how to tax differently if somebody from Pittsburgh, somebody from a rural community around Pittsburgh, or somebody from, let's say, San Francisco, New York. Now, here is where it gets tricky. Because when we think about taxation, what should come up immediately is how will people respond with respect to taxes? If I start taxing geography, then the response that I would expect from individual is that they will move around. Might migrate to different areas. This is also a problem, but it could also be an opportunity. So determining our taxes would have to require to understanding exactly how people choose how to migrate around the United States. In case you're wondering how big should be these premiums or deduction, they're significant. And if, maybe here I'm speaking against my own interest, but somebody in Pittsburgh should maybe be taxed about $3,000 more on average than somebody who lives in the surrounding rural area, income being the same. Next slide, please. Next aspect I've been thinking about is away from taxes, but thinking more about technology. And this is also joint work with a variety of faculty members here at Tepper and also outside of Tepper, still at CMU. Let me ask a question, which is, when I automate or when I implement a different type of technology, which type of workers suffer the most? On panel A, you see, for example, a study we conducted at several semiconductor plants around the world. And what we see is that when we automate, we have a reduction in employment. Nobody should be surprised about that. But that contraction is mostly concentrated at the middle. Middle skill worker, middle income workers are the more impacted. By the way, we expanded this research and we start thinking about, is this a more broader pattern? And the answer is yes. Now, panel B is just a glimpse at a different type of research that we've looked at that now thinks about not at automation in semiconductors, but a different type of automation that occurred during the second industrial revolution. So we go back 100 years. There too, if you look at this color map, you see that the areas in green, those are the areas that are being the most automated, are for middle skill workers. So this makes me think that automation, it's not a modern phenomenon how impact a worker, but has been systematically impacting worker in the same time for a long time. Next slide, please. Let me conclude with a bit more of a dorky type of research that I'm also interested about, but could have really important implication in our understanding of technology, which is a bit to create a taxonomy. We think about all these different technology. I can think about from automation to cloud computing to you name it. How should I think about it? Is there a small dimensional way to think about it? The answer is yes. We've constructed a taxonomy that relies on 4 characteristics. When you think about technology, you should ask yourself 4 questions. Number 1, is it changing the cost of splitting tasks in a process? Number 2, how easier complicated is to retask this technology to do a slightly different task. Number three, if I speed it up, how tolerant is this technology to speed? And number four, if I confront this technology with just slightly more complex tasks, how challenging is that? I'm going to stop here. I want to allow for some question, and I'm happy to engage asynchronous with any interested alumni. So Ali, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lawrence, Leanne, Alex, for these insightful talks. I wanted two things. I'd like to ask our alumni to add their questions either in Q&A. You can post some people have already posted their questions in Q&A. We're happy to respond there, or even in here in person. But I also want to start with Lawrence asking some questions that some of our alumni have already asked before this session, which is that, so you were talking about this sort of urban-rural divide. Have you thought about within sort of the urban communities, within the people in the cities, potentially how big a divide do we have relative to, urban-rural divide? I'm thinking, more like suburb versus a central part of the cities. And in some sense, what, and related to that, what policies do we see that actually so far have been successful in reducing that divide, either within cities or between rural and urban areas?
There is a couple of traditions. The most popular one is particular industrial policies that might target certain industries in certain areas. The United States, and not only have a long history about that. So that plays a role. What I'm also interested is changes that might occur with small nudges on the type of technology that might be implemented. Here is what we see, which is sometimes there are different paths that companies can take on the type of technology that might be implemented. This might have very different implication on who can benefit or get hurt by this technology. Let me give you an example. Suppose a firm will be almost indifferent between a technology that requires more high-skill individual or more middle-skill individual. Here is where a potential benefit for rural area can occur. If the technology is a de-skilling one that doesn't require high-educated, expensive, potentially workers that are only willing to live in urban areas, this is an opportunity for a rural area. This is a potential technology that would be able us to delocate some of our production or some of our processes. So there is a lot of exciting opportunities here, which is not to think only about traditional form of taxation, but also policies that hit at what firms are doing.
I see. Very good. Thank you. And so there was also another question about the effect of intellectual property clauses. Leanne answered this online, but maybe you wanted to add, is there something you want to add also in person?
Let me unmute. Right, indeed, that's a very good point, that there are a lot of resemblance in terms of non-compete clauses and other clauses that you often see in employment contracts. For example, non-poaching clauses that regards poaching other employees when you leave, as well as non-disclosure of trade secrets. And then in addition, you have intellectual property assignment clauses that you do not own any technology invention you created while you're employed. So these clauses are all in protection of the employer to carry out investments in innovation, in creating new knowledge and investing in clients or other business development projects. And I will say that the concerns are very similar. They all share the similar effects in deterring entry. It's basically protecting whoever made the investment and gives them some monopoly power, which makes it profitable for them to create that technology to begin with. And the policy concerns are often along the similar line: how strong in terms of scope of protection and, for example, the duration of the patents in protecting the inventor.
I see. Thank you. That was very useful. Thank you. Lawrence, I think there was a question for you in Q&A. I'm going to let you handle that.
Oh, yeah. It's a question from Jeffrey. Hi, Jeffrey. Long time no see. You're asking examples where technology changed the cost of splitting tasks. We have many. The flagship one is what is at the heart of the Industrial Revolution: interchangeable parts, something that came around from thinking how to actually sewing machines. Singer was one of the key developers of that. The fact that now we can split and have workers do tiny parts in production, that's an example. Modern times, you should think about the opposite, which is parts consolidation. You might have seen example of that with 3D printing. Metal additive manufacturing is a case where, for example, complex metal products that used to be soldered together by very expensive workers can now be created into one part. So we've changed literally the cost of changing, of splitting the task, either one way or another.
I see. Very nice. Thank you, Lawrence. And so I want to ask, this was a question that was asked in before the talk, and I wanted to sort of bring it to you guys' attention, which is that so the question was, what sort of changes to the system do we see that can drive the most impact and broad and inclusive growth? And let me start with Alex. When it comes to sort of market design, what do you think is the sort of biggest impact? What is having the biggest impact?
Whenever we think about market design, so we typically think about some concrete mechanisms and allocation mechanisms. So the biggest question now is actually whenever you have some objects like spectrum auctions, you have a complementarity. Whenever you want to get several licenses on the whole coverage of US in terms of spectrum. So what would be the optimal mechanisms, how to allocate them whenever you have a lot of complementarities? But also in terms of consulting people and companies, how to bid in such auctions. It's not a trivial problem.
Right, yeah, I do see that. That's sort of a big thing. And I think economists have had big impacts on the design of those sort of allocation mechanisms. Mainly what I had in mind was perhaps on the social side of things, housing programs are places where allocation is an issue. You know, typically we would like to provide sort of cheap housing, but then if you focus all the cheap housing in one area, what's going to happen is that, you know, that area, the value of houses are going to depreciate. And so, you know, I think market design there has a big role to sort of come in and help government design how to allocate sort of affordable housing.
Right. I think I fully agree with you. And again, there are already existing ways to do it, or existence ways to do it. The only thing we need to bring it to the government and show them. But as you pointed out, that there is a lot of questions about the externalities. So if we allocate a lot of
right, I think the traditional model was these sort of big housing projects, and so then what happened was when the neighborhoods where these housing projects were allocated, the quality of private investment kind of went down.
Right, and now, I mean, related to that, there is a huge problem and question about allocations of refugees. We face an enormous amount of refugees because of the Ukrainian war and actually in the previous Syria crisis. So that's a similar question: how the best way. And there is, again, a lot of progress on how to do that. But that's a big questions and important questions that we will face, I think, in next years.
Okay, perfect. And then I wanted to ask the same question for Leon. So do you, I know you mentioned some policies, and I know that this is not necessarily, it's a bit outside of the scope of your research, but I think you mentioned some policies by the Biden administration about bans and non-competes, and so on and so forth. Do you think do you see those as being sort of helpful policies? If
right. In relation to the kind of the symptoms we mentioned about the recent U.S. economy, you mentioned about increasing concentration, market power, and monopoly power leading to higher markups for large firms in the economy. And one of the reasons is we are not seeing as many startups and new firm entry. So definitely there is a lot of efforts to promote competition and to facilitate, to also both from in terms of firm startup and labor market mobility, and to ameliorate some of the problems that we have seen. Yeah,
I see.
And
I see. Very, very nice. Thank you. So I would also add one thing about this question. I think it's a great question, one that we can have lots and lots of conversations about it. But I think perhaps one of the things that we do see, and so this is the part that I was saying, that we would like to be able to provide theoretical and foundational analysis of this aspect of investing is the idea of social investing, or government-assisted social investing. So, in a few years ago, I think in Congress there was this law passed on opportunity zones, which you guys might know even better than me. But so opportunity zones are there to provide subsidies on housing investments, and so I think perhaps, of course, there is debate about whether they've been useful. And in fact, I think I've seen quite a few studies that are saying that they have not been very useful in getting house values to appreciate. At least, it hasn't been very long, but things have to change. But perhaps one way is to sort of say, we will let the private sector and government together, instead of just government focusing on its effort on, social and economic inequality. We can get both private sector and the public sector to sort of combine their efforts into this. And I think you see elements of this in some of our research, but I think there's a lot to be done in the future.
Thank you all. We want to thank our panelists, our outstanding faculty, for sharing some of their research today, and you get an idea of the exciting things that are happening here on the Tepper School. Ali, thanks for coordinating that, and for all of you for being on with us today. There's more research being done, more being taught to our students, so we invite you to be involved, and we want to thank you for attending today, but we'll also be sending out to you a follow-up email giving you some ways that you can connect with the Tepper School and with our faculty to learn more about this, to give your ideas, to provide opportunities and experiences that you might have for our students and courses and things like that. So thank you today. We're so happy to have you part of this intellectual discussion as we look at the intelligent future of inclusive growth and prosperity. So thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you in 2 weeks for our next one on healthcare, completing our series. So thank you so much for joining us today.